Good morning. This is Attorney Vincent Davis, and this is The Secret: How to Fight CPS and Win. And we're going to be doing a little something different today. We had a guest, and the guest was having technical difficulties. So we're going to reschedule for him to come on. What I plan on doing today is answering questions that you may have or that you may post. And I'm also going to be playing some YouTube video shorts and videos. So we're going to start with the first one. It is called Detention Hearing Reminders. All right. These are my detention hearing tricks. Your first hearing before the juvenile court in a CPS case. The one thing that you have to remember is you have to remember to argue and to show that the social worker did not offer you services in order to prevent the detention and placement of your children in a foster home. The social worker has to prove two things at a detention hearing, at least in California, and I would guess in other states, but check with your attorney. The social worker has to show that, you're some type of substantial risk to the child. That's pretty hard to do, especially if this is a one-time incident or the problem has been resolved. But the other thing they have to do is they have to show that they offered you services that would prevent detention. Talk to your attorney before going. Okay, here's a tip for the jurisdictional hearing, which is generally the second and or the third hearing in a CPS case here in California. At the jurisdictional hearing, the judge must decide if the allegations the social worker has charged you with are true or partially true. If they're not true, the case is thrown out. If they are true, you proceed immediately, in most cases, to the dispositional hearing. Sometimes the jurisdictional and dispositional hearing are done together. But here's the tip. The important tip is before you go to court, maybe a week, 10 days, sit down with your lawyer on the phone, on a Zoom, in person. Come up with a strategy for the jurisdictional hearing. You might want to discuss witnesses that need to be called. You might want to discuss documentary evidence that needs to be subpoenaed. Sit down with your lawyer and make sure that he or she is ready with you for this important jurisdictional hearing. Okay, good morning. I'm back, and it looks like our guest, Mike, is back with us. Mike, are you there? I know Mike was having some technical difficulties, so I think he's still frozen on the feed, and he's not going to be able to join us. As I mentioned earlier when I started the show, since Mike is having technical difficulties, I'm going to try to do the show by taking questions from the audience. And here's one question right now. Julie says, "Help, are you taking calls?" Unfortunately, I'm not taking calls right now, Julie, but you can get on this show with me by posting your email in the chat, and my producer will send you a link to join me on the call, or you can just post your questions in the chat. I see you're watching on YouTube. Whoops. I see you're watching on YouTube, so go ahead and post your comments there. And that's the direction for everyone this morning. If you'd like to be on, post your email in the chat. We'll send you a link. Okay, here's Julie's question. I signed a stipulation with DCF, otherwise known as CPS, Massachusetts, on October 18th at my hearing on the merits. They do not want to take my case to trial, and agreed to take out the word unfit and reunify my family. Okay, Julie, what's the rest of that question? Because if reunify your family means bring them back together, that might be a good deal for you. So I don't know if that was your question, Julie. All right, while we're waiting for Julie, I'm going to play another tip. Let me give you some tips on how to talk to your prospective CPS attorney or even your CPS attorney when you speak to them in person or on the phone. The first thing you want to tell them is not a story of your case. Do not tell them that. Put a fence around the story of your case before you tell the story. Be ready to tell the attorney the posture of the case, where you're at in the case, the next court hearing, and what type of hearing it is. And then, if he or she has the time, you can tell the story of the case. A lot of times, the story has no impact on the different phases of the case. I know that sounds strange, but each phase in a CPS case is different from the previous phase. So what happened 2 phases ago may not be relevant now. Call me, 888-888-6582. Okay, so here's Julie with her follow-up question. What do I do when Massachusetts DCFS agreed to a stipulation in lieu of trial? Oh, I lost you. In lieu of trial, they're not honoring. You have to, first of all, talk to your attorney and then make a motion or some type of, what do they call, order to show cause, rate contempt to file against DCF, CPS in Massachusetts if they're not honoring the agreement. Now, the way you wrote that first part of the question was at the very last part. They took out the word unfit and reunify my family. That's the key. Reunify my family. Did that mean they were going to give you reunification services for the next 6 months and not return the children home? Or were they going to return the children home and give you what's called family maintenance services? So that's the key, Julie, that I need to know. If they said they were going to give you family maintenance services and they haven't returned the children home, I'd speak to my attorney immediately and perhaps contemplate a federal lawsuit because they're violating your and your children's civil rights. If they mean they're going to give you reunification services and not return the children home, that means you're not getting the children back right now for at least the next 6 months. So it sounds like you may have a misunderstanding of what you agreed to. So I would definitely talk to your lawyer. Okay, Megan says, when I request my records from CPS, they said I need to briefly state my reason for the request, and I am sure of what to say. First of all, I don't think you have to state a reason for getting your records from CPS. Probably what you meant, Megan, is you're trying to get your records from the clerk of the court. And one of the reasons that you can put is that you just want to review your case and have record of your case. I tell a lot of clients that I represent, for example, in civil rights cases, hey, I'd like to see my record because I'm contemplating bringing a civil rights case. And in California, you have to file, I think it's called 827 petition to get a copy of the record. And I think you do have to give some type of reason, but it doesn't have to be, I'm saving the world kind of reason. It just has to be a reason that you want your record to be reviewed. Okay, here is Julie's back with us. Court, so there's not sending them home, and changed my goal a few weeks after agreeing to start reunification services in home. I have 5 beautiful children. The case has been so corrupt. It's heartbreaking. Children's dad died on July 30th of an overdose, and I have done everything. Says we filed a 480-page abuse of discretion and several months to be heard in a week and a half. Kids were to be sent home and they were to provide a new action plan reunification based solely. Julie, let me stop for a second because it's become apparent to me that you may not understand the agreement you entered into. If the agreement was for them to return the children home immediately, you'd have the children, 99 times out of 100. Social workers and counties and states aren't looking to be sued by not returning the children because that agreement you had most likely was a court order. So there's something in the agreement apparently that's going to give CPS some type of wiggle room, and that's what you're going to have to contend with and talk to your attorney. Um, if you want, give me a call at 888-888-6582. I actually know a very good um, attorney in Massachusetts. He's in Boston, that does CPS cases, and he's very good. And one of the things you might want to do is you might want to just Google and find his name. He has a YouTube channel, just like me, and he does primarily these types of cases. So definitely do some homework on YouTube. Okay. Okay, going back to Megan. Megan says, "Oh, you were the custodian of records of CPS, or the clerk of the court, and it must be the custodian of records." And this is what I mentioned to you earlier, Megan. I want the records before starting. Uh, I plan on suing. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why you can give. But I think you might be going to the wrong place to get your records. Think about this for a moment. Why would you ask the person that you're about to sue for a copy of your records and file? Something might get misplaced by quote unquote accident. You have a right to your file and you can get it from the court clerk. So what I would do is I would make a request in your state for a court clerk to give you copies of the file. All you have to do is walk in with your government issued ID and ask for the file to be copied and given to you. In California, that's usually done without any forms, but I noticed in Los Angeles County, they started making you file what's called an 827 petition. So you could just, if you're in California, you can Google JV 827 and get the form, and you should talk to your lawyer about how to fill that out. Okay. But there's probably something you might want from the CPS, which the court clerk won't have, and that's called the delivered service logs. And in most states, like California, everything is computerized because these are the daily diary notes of your case that the CPS worker covers, and they are entered into a statewide system and shipped to the state of California and shipped to the federal government, the Department of Health and Human Services, and they use those delivered service logs to do audits. To make sure that the workers are doing the right things and that they're earning their money under the federal rules and regulations of Department of Health and Human Services. Now, here's something that I want you to pay attention to because this actually happened to me many years ago. Um, the delivered service logs that I got during the case representing the mother were set A. When we filed a lawsuit for and asked for the delivered service logs again, they gave me set B, a totally different set of delivered service logs. And one of the funny things that happened was while I was taking the deposition of the social worker, they didn't realize that I was or had copies of the original delivered service logs. So I started asking questions about those, and they didn't realize that I even had those records. So if it's good in every case that you and your attorney should get the delivered service logs while you're doing with the CPS case in in the trial court. Don't wait necessarily until you do it. And if you do it and if you wait and if you get the delivered service logs, you might want to check the computer logs to make sure when changes were made. Let me give you an example. If I'm a social worker, I can enter a delivered service log today about your case. Okay. Then when you sue me a year later, okay, I can go in and I can change the delivered service logs. I can add to the delivered service logs. Now, you'll never know that unless you and your civil rights lawyer check to see when any changes are made. Changes adding things, changes modifying things, changes deleting things. Okay? So you want to make sure that you do that. And in a sense, if you ask for them in the trial court, and in the civil rights case, you might catch them doing something kind of funny. Okay, we're going back to Julie. Julie says kids were to be sent home and they were to provide a new action communication plan based solely. And then she says, I'm over 45,000 spent since September 3rd this year to get my kids home safely on a family lawyer. This is scary and disturbing. Okay, I would agree with you, Julie. What I would do is I would give me a call at 888-888-6582, and we can talk more in depth about your case. And hopefully, you're in California. All right. Here is another comment from YouTube or question. It says, I made a report against my husband about domestic violence and my child was present in there, but now ACS got involved and now they're making lies and making so much things up. Okay, that's something that we hear all the time. Oh, here's a comment by Julie Carlson. Yes, that's the guy in Massachusetts, Julie. Kevin Patrick Seaver. We're not personal friends, but we've talked several times. And he and I have corresponded several times electronically. And he knows what he's doing. So if you need a lawyer in your area, in the Massachusetts area, this gentleman would be a person to call. No, I'm not telling you that I'm guaranteeing you he's going to be, the savior on this case, but he's a place to start, and you have to feel him out and you have to talk to him. And maybe if you don't like him, he can give you other referrals. Okay, it says, oh, here's another comment by Julie. I tried to hire him when I took this attorney. He couldn't accept the case when I got a lawyer after 3 failed court appointed. This is disturbing. My babies have multiple 51 A's on foster placements. I'm not sure what that 51 A's, but if you couldn't hire him or if he couldn't take the case at the time, what I would do is I would call again and see if he can take the case now. All right. Despite all the collaterals in my life claiming I've done everything, my children should be home. DCFS states that they are not noticed, just them enough observational behavior changes from a DV victim. Now, that's an interesting point because I saw in a lawsuit a few years ago, social workers aren't really qualified to make certain types or give certain types of opinions. I want to give you the example that I witnessed. So apparently, a social worker or social workers testified in a case that the mom was suffering from something called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. It was a psychological disorder that at the time was recognized in the DSMs nationwide as a mental disorder. But to make a long story short, they didn't have any expert testimony that said, yes, this woman suffers from a mental disorder, and it's called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Well, subsequently, and she lost her child. Subsequently, in the later lawsuit, a jury found that the social workers didn't even have the capacity or ability to make that type of opinion. So, you should talk to your lawyer about that as well, Julie. Does the social worker have the qualifications to make give an opinion that you haven't changed your behavior? Now, just think about it. That's a pretty damn hard thing to do if you're not qualified. I mean, if you're not a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or some type of maybe even licensed therapist, how are you going to make an opinion about whether there have been substantial changes such that the children will go home? A lot of times social workers make these types of opinions or give these types of opinions in reports, and they have no basis for do it. First of all, they're not qualified to do it. Secondly, they don't have the data to do it. They meet with you maybe once a month for 15 minutes, a half hour, or even an hour. How can they tell if you've made substantial changes in your life regarding the counseling? The better person to ask for is your counselor, and get a letter from your counselor that says, hey, Julie Carlson has been counseling with me for, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months. And based upon my observations, she has made substantial changes. Now, in my humble opinion, that would trump anything that the social worker would have to say or could say. I will call you today. All right, good idea. Let's go to another comment. Here we have something from Stacy. Stacy's on Facebook. My ex is an attorney formerly for Niagara Company CPS or Niagara County CPS in New York. Okay, that's not a good start. He has been indicated for, or maybe indicted, or it says indicated for child abuse, maltreatment 4 times, and they're still refusing to give me my kids. Okay, that sounds very unusual, Stacy. Stacy goes on to say, I have no history of abuse, no history of arrest. I'm a non-smoker. I rarely drink. I own my own home. I am a medical professional. I have no mental illness history. Okay. So, Stacy, what you're getting at sounds like there might be some type of nepotism going on with your husband and the favors that he might be getting from the social workers or the court. Now, I don't know that that's true or not true. I, haven't read the file. But if you suspect this type of thing going on, there are 2 things that you must do, and they don't cost you any money, other than, you may want to have your attorney review it. Number 1, you need to file a case and a complaint with the Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C. Realistically, their regulations and their money control all CPS cases nationwide, and they have a complaint system. I happen to know of a case where a complaint to DHHS changed the case completely, turned everything around for the mother and her mother, the grandmother. So make that complaint. And if they choose to investigate it, they assign nationally known social workers to the case that don't work for any county usually. They're just private social workers. And they do a complete review of the case, starting with those delivered service logs I mentioned earlier that I suggested that everyone get on their case. The second thing you have to do is you have to file a complaint with your local U.S. Justice Department. And you want the Civil Rights Division. Okay, so the Justice Department in your area, the Justice Department is divided up into geographic areas across the country. The one in your area will have a criminal division, it'll have a civil division, and it'll have a civil rights division. That's the division you want to talk to, and you want to lodge a complaint. Okay, Stacy? So please look into that. Okay, everyone watching, if you have questions, don't forget to post them. Okay, here's Megan says, Megan says, what is a JD 827? Megan, okay, with that question, I now know you are probably in California. Form JV 827 is a form that you file with the court to give you a copy of your complete file. Okay. Presumably in the old days, if you were a party to the case, like the mother on the case, you just get a copy of your file anytime you wanted it from the court clerk. I think they tightened up the regulations, and now if you want a copy of your file or anything in the file, or reporters' transcripts, you have to file what's called an 827 form. 827 also refers to Welfare and Institutions Code Section 827. And it talks about who is able to get copies of the file. So if you want to know if you're one of those people in California, which in my opinion you are, to get a copy of the file, it'll tell you what to do and how to do it. And I think there's 827 and 828. There's a bunch of statutes in that section that you should read and become familiar with. Okay. It says, Stacy says he's a current, Niagara County Public Defender. So here's the problem. When you have a county employee involved in something, generally the county should not be prosecuting the case against him. I know in California, you're able to make a request to the California Attorney General's office in Sacramento, which is at the state level, to come in and take over the case. So if you believe there's something funny going on, remember those two complaints I told you, DHHS, and you can just Google it, or the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, you can just Google it in your area. That was for Stacy. Okay, Julie says, in Massachusetts, a 51A is a report of abuse, and basically what brings CPS into your life when a mandated reporter or anonymous reporter files allegations of abuse. And I think previously, Julie, you said that there have been several 51As against the foster placement, which is not good. I hope you've talked to your attorney, or you plan on getting, that new attorney that I mentioned, or that old attorney that actually you've already tried to talk to him. He couldn't take the case at the time, but call back and tell Mr. Seaver, if he can't take the case, can he give you at least 3 referrals? All right. Recently, actually this past week, I was calling around trying to find an attorney for someone up in Northern California. And finally, I left a message for an attorney, and I said, hey, call me back. I want to know if I can refer a client to you. And number 2, I want to know, if you can't take the case, can you refer me 3 people that can possibly take the case? And the receptionist who was taking the message says, oh, I can tell you 2 guys right now. They're in the juvenile court every day, and they're really good attorneys. So the receptionist who was taking my message gave me 2 referrals. I called both of them. One couldn't do it because he was in another county, but the other one could do it. So you get referrals from who knows, from all types of people. All right, let's go up because Julie's still writing. I'm familiar with the use disorder, but I have everyone from state police to therapists to psychiatrists saying the opposite of DCF CPS. Is sick child trafficking exactly my therapist states the opinion? Well, here's the thing, Julie. If these experts and people are saying this, you need to bring in those people to testify. You may need to get a written declaration to support the fact that the judge should hear them testify. I recently, and I'm not in agreement with this being the law, but judges are judges and they control their own courtroom, and you don't want to be on appeal. But recently, a judge basically implied that I had to get a declaration from the witness as to what this witness might say before the judge would allow him to testify. I objected to it just for the record, but I didn't argue with it, argue with the judge. I recognize the judge is wearing the black robe. I'm not wearing the black robe. It's the judge's courtroom. Judges, do different things in different courtrooms. So I'm going to comply with the judge's order. If we lose, of course, that will be one of my bases for appeal, but it might not be a very good basis depending on what my witness says in the declaration. So, you can disagree with judges, but it's never a good strategy to get in, an open court discussion about or argument about their ruling. Usually, once judges make a ruling, that's it. And, let's move on. I tell that all the time to colleagues or attorneys that work for me. Here's Julie again. Sorry for blowing up your feed. I'm just a loss. These are my babies. Julie, first of all, I don't mind you blowing up the feed. They just lost their dad a few months ago. I can't let them be taken over a broken or corrupt system. Julie, I feel you. I agree with you. Make sure you and your attorney are working together. Okay? Make sure that is happening. All right, let's go to Chris. Chris Tabler is watching us on YouTube. Chris, you say you have a question, but I don't see it anywhere in the posts. So if you have a question, let me know and post it, and I'll get back to you. Okay, we got DES, DCPP, signed safety protection plan that I, the biological mother, signed 436 days ago. FN litigation opened up a full-blown custody battle with maternal grandparents who are the only division-approved supervisors. Not my choice, not my decision, falls upon deaf ears. My visitation must be supervised. I was able to see my daughter daily at my parents' September 10th, my mother said I cannot come to her property. I see my child 2 days a week. At my parenting course, I have missed 9 visits due to, and then she goes on to say, biological father was criminally charged with child abuse. In October 2021, I fought almost 2 years, and he still has his rights. He was in prison, and I'm the mother. Okay, Des, so tell me what the question is, and we'll get back to you. I mean, Des, that story that you just mentioned is not unfamiliar. I hear that story quite a bit. Okay. Okay, Megan says, California with my name, date of birth. All right, so you're in California, Megan. Very good. So the 827 is the form that you'll want to use. Alrighty, let's see. Okay, Des also posted, I do not know where my child is. Okay, so if you're in California, and it might be like this in other states, Des, um, a few years ago, seems like 6, 7 years ago, they passed a law where you don't get to know where your child is in foster care. Apparently, there were a lot of issues with parents knowing where the child was, issues such as possible parental kidnapping, threats of violence, that type of thing. So they made the foster parents' home confidential. I do know in several cases that I'm involved with, foster parents and the parents get along so well. The foster family just tells them, "Hey, this is where I live," and they get along that well. But in a lot of cases, and I don't think they're supposed to, but um, they do. People do what they're going to do. Um, Here's Megan again. I only feared telling about suing till after I got my copies of the records. I am aware that they have to be formally advised of a suit. Now, Megan, if you're in California, which I think that you said you were, um, that last sentence that you said is not true, not totally true. Okay, there are two types of claims and causes of action you can make against a social worker. One is based upon state law, one is based upon federal law. If you're bringing a state claim based lawsuit, you do have to formally advise by something called a tort claim form. Okay. But if you're just suing under federal law, which I do a lot, you don't have to give that tort claim advance notice. Um, so depending on what your lawyer decides, whether you're going to bring the case in state court and address state claims, or they're going to bring federal claims, that's a big decision, because there's differences in the federal rules of evidence versus the California Code of Evidence. There's big differences between the federal rules of civil procedure and the California Civil Procedure Code. And these are substantial differences. There's differences in juries. California, you only have to convince 9 out of 12 jurors that you should win a certain amount of money. And in the federal system, I think it's a unanimous decision. So before you pick where you sue and how you sue, you need to talk to your lawyer. And before you do that, you and your lawyer have to decide with whether you're going to be proceeding on state or federal claims. Now, a lot of attorneys file state and federal claims, and you can do that. And you may file it in state court. 8 times out of 10, maybe 9 times out of 10, the social workers then have a right to remove the case to federal court because you're suing under some type of federal cause of action. So that's something you definitely should talk to your lawyer about. Okay, here's Des telling us they left the state with her, my parents, without my consent. Well, Des, if this case is still open, which it may not be, you got to talk to your lawyer about bringing the kids back into the state. Now, if the case is closed with some type of permanent plan in California, it would be guardianship, legal guardianship, or adoption. They probably would have the right to leave the state. So it depends on whether, what your state laws are and what type of plan is in place. Okay, here's Chris. Chris Here's the question he wanted to ask. The judge gave me custody. Then they came to the hospital and detained my baby for not drinking enough formula. Then before the 48 hours, they gave my baby away to some foster people. Then the judge told all, hold on, gotta scroll down. They do is lie. They told the judge that my baby was at the hospital when he wasn't. Is there any way a case can get thrown out from all the lies they say if I can prove everything? The answer, Chris, is yes. But the key is if you can prove everything. So you got to talk to a lawyer on how to prove it, right? Don't think, and this is a lot, an assumption and a mistake a lot of people make. They think that their sense of justice is what controls in the courtroom, and it does not. I did a 7-minute video on YouTube called What is Justice? I suggest everyone that has a case, a CPS case, listen to that video. Just go on YouTube, search What is Justice, Vince Davis, and watch that video. There are two. I want you to watch the one where I'm standing in front of a whiteboard in the background. That's the one you got to watch. So, if you list the top 3 things about what justice is, Chris, you're probably going to come up with these top 3 things. Number 1, what people have told you. Number 2, just your inherent belief as a human being on what is just, right? And things that you've maybe seen on the internet and read. Okay? But I'm here to tell you that in 999 times out of 1,000, that's not justice, as defined in the court of law. Okay, so that's a big difference. Justice defined while we're sitting around the kitchen table is a lot different from what justice is in a court of law. Court of law is justice's rules, statutes, case law, constitution. Now, with all due respect, you probably aren't a lawyer, and you probably haven't read all of the things that I just mentioned. By definition, if you haven't done that, you probably don't have an opinion, a good working opinion about what is justice. The better thing to do is decide, Chris, what you want out of this case. Tell a lawyer and then ask the lawyer, can he or she do that? Okay? Don't start with the premise that you know what justice is. Don't forget about justice. Okay? Because in my opinion, the courtroom is a false reality. All right? For people and their regular, quote unquote, common sense. A courtroom is a reality that is controlled by the laws of the state, of the country. And unless you know those laws, you're going to be lost. Someone asked me one time, hey, why is it that 3 strikes and you're out in baseball? Why isn't it 4? Why isn't it 2? Well, that's just the rule. How do you know that's the rule? Well, you've watched it, you've played baseball probably, and you know that that's the rule. But you don't know what the rules are in a CPS courtroom. I doubt you've ever seen a CPS trial or a CPS hearing, or the rules of evidence for CPS cases, or the rules of procedure for CPS cases, or the leading case law on CPS cases, at the Supreme Court level of the United States and at the state level where you are, assuming you're in California. That's a lot of cases, Chris. Okay, Chris goes on to say, is it like they're doing some type of cover-up? And when my baby was at the hospital, he had a big gouge on his cheek from them not caring for him correctly. Why didn't they get them for neglect? Chris, there's a book, and I think it was written by a former CPS social worker, and you can find it on Amazon. It's called Medical Kidnap. Read the book. It's about hospitals covering up their negligence for and claiming child abuse. Several months ago, I did a case in Sacramento County up north in California where a kid had a couple of broken ribs, a couple broken bones, very young child. And they were blaming the parents for these injuries. And of course, they wanted to take all the young kids out of their home. Interestingly enough, we hired a doctor, an expert on child abuse, who calls me up one day and tells me, Vince, your parents are out of the running for being the culprit in this matter. And I said, well, why is that? He said, well, the way I aged the injuries took place while the child was in the hospital. We had a long trial about this, and the judge found that the injuries were not caused by the parents. Now, the judge didn't say who caused the injuries, but the reverse is true. The injuries happened while the child was in the hospital. And I'm not saying the hospital did anything on purpose. What I think happened is they were trying to give some type of emergency medical treatment to the child. They were doing it the wrong way for a child this age, according to my doctor, my expert, and it resulted in some broken bones. So, Chris, read that book, Medical Kidnap. It's real. It's real. Okay. Now there's a lot of comments coming in. We're on what, 8 different social media streams here. And Trent says, no one called me. Why? Trent, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Trent's watching us on Facebook. I'm just quickly scrolling through all the comments. I didn't see any comment. Um, so please post your question. Or if you need to call me, it's 888-888-6582. Just look at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Oh, Trent now says I asked for a phone call. No one called me. Why? Trent, I'm not sure. I have many people that work at my office. If you want to call me today, get a pen and you can text me and I'll call you later on this afternoon, California time. 310-308-7758. 310-308-7758. So Trent, that's my personal mobile phone. So text me. Perhaps you want to text me your question. I'll get back to you later today. And see if I can, offer you any assistance. Megan's back. Megan says, I know you're a busy man and help so many people, me included. I've been watching you for about a year. Would you be available to look at my case and possibly represent me in a lawsuit against CPS? Megan, the answer is resounding yes, of course. Just call the number on the screen, 888-888-6582. Leave your name and your number, and I'll get back to you. And if you were quick enough to write down my mobile phone number, you can text me on that as well. Let's see. Chris says, is that violating my civil rights? Well, if everything that you told me is true and accurate, and there's not another part of the story that you're leaving out, because you remember, I haven't reviewed your file, that is called violating your civil rights. And you might want to talk to an attorney, perhaps in your area, that can give you more information about that. Okay, Julie's back. Julie says, how is this happening in our country? That's a really good question. I do have a lot of some ideas on that. I'll tell you in a minute. The area director just agreed yesterday to assign me a new team social worker supervisor plus manager at CPS only after I called the regional director. Did area director call me? Okay, so I'm going to go to your first question. Julie, how does this happen in our country? Now, all you need to do is turn on the news, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, your local news channels, and you will see many things that you will consider to be wrongdoing or wrong by, government officials. That's just the nature of human beings running government.
I don't know where you stand, but a couple of years ago, I guess we all watched on the news a policeman kill a man. I forget the guy's name, black man. The policeman was kneeling on his neck. We all saw that. Everybody's got a smartphone today. Got these smartphones. Everybody's recording and taking videos. So we're going to see everything. Okay. Is it so different from what things happened in the past? I don't think it is. It's just everybody has a video camera. But more so, Julie, everything's controlled by money in our country. And the last time I researched this, CPS is a $70 billion business in the United States. 70 billion. It's probably more now. So, business is business. CPS makes money when they take your child. That's just a fact. Now, there may be reasons why they earn money, but doesn't that really give them the incentive to take your child? They make money when the kid is adopted out by a non-relative. Now, maybe your child needed to be taken away from you or not. I don't know. I don't know the case. But let's start from the beginning. If we're going to make money and give money to the county and to the states, where do you think they're leaning? Julie, I've mentioned this before, but I'll just say it again. When I was, before I became a lawyer, before law school, I was a certified public accountant. And I worked for a very large, at the time, a firm that was considered one of the 8 largest CPA firms in the country. No, in the world. In the world. Used to be called the Big 8. Now I think it's the Big 4. But one of our clients was, one of our specialties in the LA office was what they call government accounting and governmental auditing. As a matter of fact, I think LA County was one of the office's biggest clients at that time. I don't know if they're still a client of my old firm. But one of the things I want you to realize is that governmental entities like CPS, they exist to make money. You you thought that they existed to provide services, which, they do, police, fire, that type of thing. But they exist to make money, to have their budgets grow every year. And generally speaking, they're able to do that by showing the federal government that they need more money because they're servicing, quote unquote, more kids. Now, servicing more kids and families means they're going to take your child away and get involved in your life and tell you, you needed to take parenting, uh, counseling, drug testing, whatever, anger management. You know, now don't get me wrong, okay? And I say this, and I know a lot of people disagree with this. Is there any reason why we should have CPS in our lives? The answer to that is yes. Yes. Believe it or not, there is child abuse in the world. Most of the cases, though, that I see and people call me on, there's no real child abuse. Here's the case I get all the time. Me and the wife had a fight in the car driving home from a party on Saturday night. We both had a couple of drinks at the party and we have a fight. We get home, we're still yelling at each other. Neighbor calls the police. Somebody got arrested, and of course, social workers come out and take the kids who were asleep at home in their bedrooms upstairs with the babysitter on the couch. Now, in my opinion, is that child abuse? No. Is it risk for child abuse? Probably not. Could it be? Yeah, it could be. Because there's always those cases where we knew something happened one time and we didn't do anything about it, and then somebody ends up dead. That's what everybody's concerned about. That they are going to be blamed because a kid ends up dead. I get it. And, that combined with the money, things get out of, they get askew, bent, you know, and the system becomes used for other things. I tell people that I work with all the time, especially some my attorneys. When you're in a CPS case or any case, everybody has their own agenda, and it ain't the same as your agenda. Okay, so think about that. You go into a courtroom, bailiff has his or her own agenda. The clerk has his or her own agenda. The court reporter has his or her own agenda. The judge has his or her own agenda. The social worker has his or her own agenda. The social worker's attorney has his or her own agenda. The minor's attorney has his or her own agenda. Minors, depending on what their age, they have their own agenda, right? The fathers have their own agendas, and their attorneys have their own agendas, and the mother has her own agenda, and her attorney has his or her own agenda. And all of these agendas might not line up, right? They're usually like this. All right. So, Jerry Spence, I'm a graduate of the Jerry Spence Trial Lawyers College, which is now called the Jerry Spence Method, told me something that was actually mind boggling to me. And I had been practicing maybe at that time, maybe 18, 20 years. I've been doing it 36 years now. But when Jerry first said this to me, I didn't know what to think. And I realized I had been representing people the wrong way. And here's what he told me. He said, Vince, when you walk into a courtroom, whose glasses do you look at the case through? How do you view the case? I said, I look through my own glasses and I view it. He said, no, that's wrong. He says, you know why that's wrong? He says, because you aren't making the decision. Why are you viewing it from your perspective? Well, because I'm right. No, you're not. You got to view these cases from other people's perspectives. View the case through the judge's eyes, right? View the case through the social worker's eyes. Now, I told this to a client, and I tell this to people all the time. My job and your job is not to be right. It's not to be vindicated. It is to get your children back home as fast and efficiently as possible. Those two things are completely different. I wouldn't even say they're two different sides of the same coin. They're just completely different. So the first thing I ask a lot of people is, hey, you want to be right or you want to get your kids back? In that case I told you about in Sacramento with the broken bones, maybe the first month, 2 months of the case, I was kind of battling back and forth with my client and my client's family because they thought I should be doing something different than what I was doing. Now, right, I'm the 30-year attorney or 35 plus year attorney. They've never done a case and they're telling me. It was a battle to get my client on board with me. It was a battle to get the family on board. I don't think they ever got on board. When we won the case, I never heard a word from the family. Like, oh, I guess you were right. Oh, good job. Never heard that. Client was very happy and very grateful. But early on, I had to ask her, I said, look, do you want to be right? Do you want to make your family happy? Or do you want to win this case? And she said, I want to win this case. I want my babies back. I said, okay, well, I've been doing this a couple years. Trust me. Am I always right? No, I'm not. I'm human. Pants go on one leg at a time. But more times than not, I'm going to give you good advice. And that's why you came to me, because you thought I was an expert. And I am an expert. Okay? So, listen to my advice. All right. We are actually 5 minutes past the ending showtime. And I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. And I want to thank everyone who posted questions in the chat. Tomorrow we'll do the same thing if we don't have a guest for tomorrow. Or if any of you want to be a guest on this live stream with me, email Grace at Grace at vincentwdavis.com. I just put that in the chat. And Grace, you'll have to email her today because the show is tomorrow at 9 and she doesn't work Sundays. So you'll have to set up something today with her. And if, we can't get you on tomorrow, we do the show every day, 7 days a week. So, let us know. So Des says, I do. Apparently, Des, you want to be on the show. So I put Grace's email there. Contact Grace, and she'll set something up with you for tomorrow. Okay? So, everyone, I'll see you tomorrow, and thank you for watching today. Have a good day. Have a good Saturday. Bye bye.